Electric Circus by Common. This was a request from a former coworker whom I bonded with back in those great, lovely summer nights at the Lowe's Garden Center back in 2022. I consider myself to be a fairly casual Common fan, though me and Alex had a common interest in music. I've only ever listened to Bee and Like Water for Chocolate in their entirety, so I'm just generally familiar with his popular work. I do recognize those two albums to be some of the greatest, and by greatest I mean objectively influential and often criminally underrated rap albums of all time. This is Common's 2002 highly experimental response to Like Water for Chocolate and the predecessor to my favorite rap album of all time, Bee. To me, Common is no novice when it comes to going against the grain and speaking out for what he believes in. He's speaking against, he's an activist. His best quality is in his production. His fantastic samples from some of the artists who have helped shape who he is. He's also a lyrical master in his own right, and he has such a unique voice that attributes to his ability to flow seamlessly with a lot of these great beats that he gets from these samples. In this album, he relies heavily on like a whole parade full of features. It would probably take me 3 minutes to list all of the people that are on this album. I would say most notably, you have Pharrell, for better or for worse, on that song. Erykah Badu. It's a lot of features. He also tells you the purpose of the album with the cover, which I think is interesting, and it's such an outlier compared to everything else. As for the music itself, this was a long one. It was about 70 minutes of listening. Songs are longer. I had to separate it into 2 different sessions during and after work to be able to get into it. The album has some misses scattered throughout it, with my least favorite being Soul Power or maybe New Wave. I think this album lacks a little bit of what makes Common so spectacular lyrically, as some of these songs are just cryptic nonsense to me. They don't really seem to mean anything at face value. This is a guy who's often quite blunt, sometimes utilizing smooth metaphors, and he has great wordplay to tackle sensitive topics of racial inequality. He talks about God, Common, his theme of love and lust, and most importantly, his rise to fame as a black man from Chicago. That seems to be something he's always referencing in his music. And it seems to be the biggest takeaway from most of his listeners is that his sound and lyricism can get redundant despite the great beats and samples he has. And while he does have a basic formula with his lyrics and his themes and the beats, it works for me. It's stuff I can listen to over and over again, and I don't really feel ashamed about not picking up on everything he says or every little part of the song, because I know I'll listen to it again. That's just the way it goes. So Common is a pretty self-aware dude. I think that plays into the weakness of this album. I think he tried a little bit too hard. He's got some very interesting concepts, like the song New Wave is pretty self-explanatory. I would just give that a listen and you'll understand what I mean. Come Close is a pretty big anomaly here, as you could throw that on B, I think, and I wouldn't question it. The song Between Me, You, and Liberation is also a pretty familiar sound, and it harks on the same themes that he does in some of his other more popular albums. So I wouldn't say this album is completely experimental. Like it's not straying super far from the norm. And I think that was done with intention, because there are these classic Common sounding songs followed by the less than classic Common sound you get with New Wave, Star 6ix9ine, and Jimmy Was a Rock Star, to name a few. I think those are really some of the standout experimental tracks here that I'm not really a fan of. He's clearly making a point with some of these songs, though. Some stick and some don't. I think that's the way it's going to go with some of these more experimental albums, especially in experimental, rap and hip hop. This is more rap than hip hop, I would say. And kind of building off of that, I think the strangest part about this listen for me was that when I opened the album, I thought I had to double check to see if this was from 2000 or 2022. I didn't know if the second zero was a 2 or a 0. And that's really it. That's the biggest takeaway from this album, is that it's ahead of its time, for better or for worse. He doesn't venture far enough to lose me, like I said, so I'll give this a 7.5 out of 10. I wouldn't skip any of the songs. Maybe the song with Pharrell. I hate to say it, but I don't know. Some of the songs are just so strange, and I'm still kind of confused about what I just listened to. I do think the last song is really good. It's kind of just like 10-minute long, just choir. I think it's pretty cool. That's probably not the best word to use, but it's pretty cool. But not common sounding at all. My favorite song is I Am Music featuring Jill Scott, and my least favorite is probably New Wave or Soul Power. If you're a Fake Enough or a Fairweather Common fan like myself, give it a try and maybe force yourself through it. I think there's some good things to take away from this album, and some are just hits and misses, and that's what you get with experimental rap. So thank you for listening, and keep your stick on the ice.